Today we are doing Gemara Eruvin Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, and that because that's the Mishnah. Then we're going to continue on to Daf Yud Daled. So we're going to start with the Mishnah. Hakora Shamru Rechava Kadei Lekabel Ariach. So when we're talking about this entire time about putting a Hakora, how fit is it? It has to be wide enough to hold a brick. And an ariach is a small brick, is half of a brick that is made up of 3 tefachim, meaning 1.5 tefachim is how wide the korah must be. So then another statement is that it's sufficient for the korah to be 1 tefach wide in order to hold a small brick across its width. It has to be wide enough and long and strong enough to hold a small brick. Rabbi Yehuda says all that matters is that it's wide enough, not that it has to be strong enough to hold the brick. If it's made up out of straw or out of reeds, you view it as if it's made out of metal, and therefore it should be more than strong enough to hold whatever it is. Akuma ro'inoto kilo hi pshuta. If it's crooked, you view it as if it's straight. Agula ro'inoto kilo murubah. And if it's rounded, if it's square. And if it's bent, you view it if it's straight. If it's rounded, you look as if it's squared off. So I will. Let's look at the photos for those past cases. Okay, so again, we're in Parish Chai. So that first diagram is number 171. So that's the difference between a levana, which is a brick, and then half of that is the ariach, which is one that we're using. So as long as the ariach is able to fit on top of the korah, that's what counts. And then we're talking about when you have, let's say, a weird shape. So then we don't deal with things as if they're circles. Similarly, we had by the size entryway, basically we want to square it off for the purposes of measuring if it's sufficiently large. And also, similar, if you have a nice archway or if it's slanted in one other way, we view it as if it's perfect straight right angles, perpendicular. We don't deal with crooked. So,
sorry, on that one that's on the diagonal there, it looks like the straight dotted line, if I'm reading that picture correctly, is lower. Do we actually lower that diagonal, or am I misreading that?
We measure based on the lowest point, and then we are saying the width is not based on the diagonal, it's based on this leg of the triangle.
Right, but that seems like a leniency because we had a maximum height, and there, the upper part of that diagonal is higher than what we're sort of flattening it out to.
So we're not addressing the cases of being half above, half below, which we addressed earlier. We're just simply stating that you view it as if it's that long.
Okay.
Not that not if it's outside the range, whether or not that's sufficient or not. We're not addressing.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right.
So, yeah, a good point. So, okay, and in terms of then the Mishnah gives us a way to understand when the round calls sheyesh mekifo shlosha tefachim yesh bo rochav tefach. So with approximation that whenever it's got a circumference of 3, that means that its width is roughly 1. So, yes. Mathematically, we know that there's existence of pi. Gemara seemingly knew that too. They're just oftentimes Gemara uses approximations of things, because if you had a round thing, you could measure it and see that's not the case. But for these purposes, 3 is sufficiently accurate. Okay, now
as opposed to 3.14, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
So, but in general, the Gemara is referring to pi. They use 3. Again, because a lot of times we're not necessarily looking for the exact mathematical thing. We're looking for what we functionally use as the amount. We'll come to other cases similar to that when we're talking about the length along the diagonals later on in Eruvin as well. So now we're going to learn Daf Yud Aleph tefach BAYT. So the problem is the Mishnah says in one case it says you need a tefach for the width, and one case it says you need a tefach and a half for the width of the korah. So which one is it? Kimin the Rachav Kelakavel Tefach, Idachati Tefach, Malabin Le, Bettina, Mashu, Mihagisav, Kama. So why do we say, wait, is it 1 or 1.5? And really we say it's 1, and then once the cross beam is 1 tefach wide, then by use of a little bit of plaster, that'll ensure that the 1.5 width brick will stay sturdily on that beam. So Amar Rabba Barahuna Korash Amru Tzrika Shtei Bria Kadei Lakabel Ariach Omamidei Korah and Azrichin Sheheb Brian Lakadei Lakabel Ariach. So Rahuna says the only part that needs to be structurally strong is the cross beam, but whatever is supporting it does not need to be structurally strong. Rav Chisda Amar Echadzeh V'Echadzeh Tzrichim Sheheb Brian Kadei Lakabel Korah Ariach. Rav Chisda says no, whether it be the supports for the core itself has to be sufficiently strong to hold both the core itself along with a brick on top of it. If it's too flimsy, then it's no good. Amar Sheshet Hinel Korah Gabe Mavoy Uparis Ala Machatzelet Vigbio Mina Karka Shlosha Korah Enkan Chetz. So Sheshet says that if you put the Korah on top of the Mavoy and then you spread out a mat over it, you have neither a and it ends up dripping down to within 3 tefachim of the ground. Sorry, more than 3 tefachim off the ground. You have neither a korah nor a wall. Okay, so that is, let's do that here. That sure is 176, right? So basically, you threw the mat over the korah. So it has to be sufficiently strong.
Rabbi, that case sounds counterintuitive to me. I mean, in terms of reminding you that you can only carry this far and not further, if a korah by itself would suffice, then a korah that's with a rug draped over it that's hanging down almost to the ground, wouldn't that be like a super reminder?
It would be, but the problem is that once it's removed from the shape of what we determine reminders to be, you won't think of it as being a reminder anymore.
Sorry?
Once it's there's 3 types of reminders that are allowed that will fix a mavoi, b'drabanan, right? So the Rabbanan determined that there's 3 permissible ways to allow a mavoi. You can either put an alleyway. You can either put a crossbeam, a side post, or it has to look like it's a doorway. It has to be like a door frame. So if it's none of those 3, even though you're right, it might be a better wall to some degree, but because it's not one of the ways that the Chachamim determined would be a good reminder and to fix it, therefore it won't work.
So it doesn't matter what human nature is, it's what the Rabbanim said are the 3 designated reminders.
Correct.
So the bottom line is that the Korah is covered, so it's no longer good, and the fact that it's more than 3 tefachim above the ground, it's not a wall, but if it would be less, then love would kick in. Is that what we're saying?
Correct. We'll get to that in just a moment.
Okay.
It has some technical difficulties, even though al pi sfora, you would think that it should work. But anyway, okay, thank you.
So Korah ein kan daha mechaz. You don't have a Korah because you can't see it. Mechitza ein kan daha v'yala mechitza shegedim bakim. Why is it no good for a mechitza? Because if it's more than chuck off the ground, it's a place where the young goats can cross right through, so it's not serving its proper purpose as a barrier. Tanar banan Korah yotze mekotel zev eno nogat mekotel zeh. V'chein shtei korot echad yotze mekotel zev v'echad yotze mekotel zev eno nogat zev b'zu pachot mishlosha ein tzarich lahavi korah acheret shlosha tzarich lahavi korah acheret. So we're talking about the distance between if it's too far off the ground. Similarly, if you have diagram number 177, if you have 2 beams coming off the side, or you have it being off the side of the wall, and there's a gap, if off of one of the sides, if it's more than 3, then it's no good. But if it's less than 3, then it'll work. And if the gap is more than 3, then you simply have to bridge the gap again with another korah or another piece of wood connecting. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer Pakom Arba and Sorech Lavi Korah Acheret Arba Sorech Lavi Korah Acheret. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel has his opinion for love is different. It's that it's 4, not 3. So therefore up to 4 is the gap opposed to 3. So if it's up to 4, you don't need one. But if it's 4 or more, then you do.
Rabbi, with lava, who do we pass him, like Rabbi Shimon or Rabbi or the other opinion, the Rabbanan, for 4 or 3?
Rabbanan, we're being 3.
Okay.
Similarly, if we have two thin beams going across the top, lo bezu kedei lekabel hariach, lo bezu kedei lekabel hariach, im mekablot hariach l'rachbo tefach, and tzarech lavi kor acheret, v'im lav, tzarech lavi kor acheret. Similarly, so we're talking about the case where, let's say you have 2 narrow beams. This is number 179 through 178 through 180. So if it's assuming you have 2 thin beams, so again we're going to apply love in between them. So assuming that they're between the 2 of them, they're sufficiently sized that way they could hold the small brick. We've been including the gap. That is sufficient. Whereas if they were too little, that would be no good. Okay. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer im mekabel hariach l'orko shlosha and tzarech lavi kor acheret v'im lav tzarech lavi kor acheret. So Rabbi Gamliel says that if the 2 cross beams can receive a small brick along its length, and the length is at least 3, then you don't need to have another cross beam. But if not, then it needs another one. Similar logic. So how you akat lamala vakat lamala. Let's say you had uneven beams. So that's diagram number 181. So what's the case there? Basically, you simply view the higher ones as lower, and view the lower ones as higher. So basically, you can view them as if they are magically the same height, but that either pushing it up or pushing it down. But that only works if it's in the acceptable range for a kosher korah, meaning between 10 tefachim and 20 amot. If it is below 10 tefachim or above 20 amot, then you cannot apply this, which answers all the questions from before.
Rabbi, sorry to stop you again. To me, this row-in thing that we're saying here seems a little bit arbitrary. Like, why do in some cases we say row-in, and in some cases we don't? Like, we say row-in, we're going to bring these, the vertical, we're going to fill in the vertical or gap, or we're going to bring them together. Well, okay, so why not say row in by the rug over the korah? We'll say row in as if it came down to the ground, but we don't. Why over there we don't, and over here we do?
Once you move between different realms, it makes it worse. As in, the people build in a certain simple, straightforward manner. So when you start adding things that are if you try and fix it, if you don't fix it correctly, you make it even worse. So let's say if you were to have, so then if you built a proper, if you built, let's say you're trying to build a fence, right? So if you're trying to build a fence, you have to make sure that the fence is built as a fence. You're trying to turn a fence into a wall, and you don't do it right. You have neither a fence nor a wall. You simply have a dilapidated structure that's falling over. So then you have to make sure that what you're building is built properly and soundly. Because if you put a curtain over and you don't do it properly, basically instead of having a nice korah over your head to remind you. Instead, you now have a half doorway curtain thing that's just in your way that you're going to move out of the way as you leave, as opposed to being a functional reminder. Because you basically tried to fix it by making like a wall, because you didn't fully make it into a wall. Instead, now it's neither a wall nor is it a good reminder. So the answer is that it's a lot of it's based on if you try and fix it too much, it makes things worse, and we tend to view things relatively linearly. That's why building on the corners is no good, and why when things are round we square it up again for structures. It's just simply how Eruvin works. It deals with things very linearly and straightforward. Once they get more complicated, then it gets and then it starts messing things up. That's not how people build. So okay, so now let's continue. Again, we're gonna have to please ask cold questions till the end, because we have a very long job today. Yeah. Amar Baye, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Savar La, Kavua, Bechada, Upuli Le Bechada. So Beit said Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda follows father in one opinion, case and argue another one. Sarla Kavua Bechada, to eat Le Rowan. So when does he hold like his father? The question is Rowan, i.e., we view things as if they are adjacent, meaning we allow you to switch levels. Upuli Le Bechada, and we argue in one. Dilo Rabbi Yehuda Savar Lamal Me'Stream, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Savar B'Tocha Stream in Lamal Me'Stream La. So he argues that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion states that you have until, remember, as we stated earlier, in the parak, it has up until 40 or even 50, whereas his son says, your limit is 20. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Rechava Aval Pi She'en Bria. Rabbi Yehuda also stated that it's wide even if it's not strong. Matni La Rabbi Yehuda Lechia Barav Kamei Rav Rechava. Rabbi Yehuda said that it has to be wide. Again, why not strong? So then we reviewed it, said to Yechia Bar Rav in front of instead of Rav Rechava. Aval Pi She'en Bria. Even though it's not strong, Amrlei Atniye Rechava Bria. But don't we have it stated in the? But Rav told him no, actually it needs to be both, wide and strong. Amar Bilai Amar Rav Rechava Arba Aval Pi She'en Bria. But did it? Or Bilai said if it's wide, if it's 4 wide, even if it's not strong. It's different. Once it hits 4, being 4 wide already, then even if it's not strong, that's sufficient of a korah. The problem is for when it's smaller than that. Okay, now we're talking about the back to the strength of the korah. So if you're saying the crust made of straw, then we just made it of metal. That's what we say in the mission. But what do you mean? Didn't we say that it's strong to bear brick? So then, why isn't this? So then, why do we need to restate that? Like, why are we talking about this again? Maybe you thought that originally that when they're saying what is to carry is a brick made of its own structure, right? Meaning that if you even if it's made out of reeds, that's called a brick. A reed brick made up of that size, that was the whole. I was like, no, it's not that it has to be able to hold that. Not to be able to hold that. Rather, it's saying it's sufficient for just for the size, not necessarily for the strength. Now we're back to the now we're talking about the crooked ones. So we're going to use diagrams 183 and 184. Okay. Akuma Ron Hakilu Hipshuta. If it's crooked, you straighten it out. He doesn't obviously. Kamash Milan, go to Rabbi Zera. Rather, we're trying to prove something against Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera, if it starts inside and then it bends outside of the mavoi, it is within the 20, but the bend is above. Or if it goes below. Rowan, kol sheilu yonatol kumuto, ve'en zelazeh shlosha, and tzarech levikar acheret, v'im lav, tzarech levikar acheret. So he says that if it bends over the edge, that it would be, we're agreeing with the area here, that if it bends over the edge, that creates an issue, and that's why we're stating the case of straightening it out and where we straighten out towards. So we don't straighten out towards where that line is. Rabbi Zera actually says that that's not how it works. It's only useful if it's in the allowed range. Hanavi, this is obvious. So isn't it obvious that if it's true that it's completely out, that's a problem? No, rather it's where the cross between inside and outside. That's where we teach it. Why? No. Rather, it's useful in the case where the bend is outside, but again, it's less than 3 in the gap. So when it's there, so then lavud would allow the korah is good. Maybe we should be worried that if it's less than 3, that you might follow in that little edge, which is less than that. In that little area, you'll go outside of the lavud. Mashmalan is that no, we're not worried that for that little area you'll decide to move it out. We'll say that you'll follow the vast majority of the korah, and therefore it'll be fine. Okay, now we're going to the round case. Agula roa toki ilhi merubad. If something is round, you square it out. What do you need to say? This safer is turkala. You need it for the safer. Kol sheish bekifo shlosha tzachim yit rochav tepa. You need it because of the end case, which is talking about the circumference versus the diameter. So how do we know this? So Amar B'Yochanan, Amar Krav, Hayas, Hayam Mutzak, Eser, Ba'ama, Misato, Adsato, Admul Saviv, Chamesh Ba'ama, Komato, Vakav, Shoshim Ba'ama, Yosov, Oto, Saviv. So how do we know that about these dimensions? So we know based on pasuk about when Shlomo Melech made the kior, the Yam Shel, which was called the Yam Shel Shlomo. So how did he do it? So he made a molten sea, 10 cubits from one brim to the other one, i.e. the diameter of 10, and round it was round. It was 5 amot high, and it was 30 in circumference. So but what about the lip? What about the brim? Like, do they count that or not? And so Rabbi says we know that the brim, we know that it was there, as it states in the pasuk of Yo Tafach L'Svato Kama Se Perach Roshan Alpayim Bad Yachil. So because it says that the lip was 1 tefach thick, and that the brim looked like it was a brim of a cup, and as the petals of a lily, and it contained 2,000 baht, which is a volume measurement. So that means that so you're saying that that's the case. That means that's a very thin lip. So mashu, but it's got to be at least a little bit more than 30 then. Rather, when they were counting, they were calculating about it on the outside. That's why we can ignore whatever the width of the rim itself was. Tanya Rabbi Chia Yam Shas Shlomo Hayam Machazik 150 mikvatara. So Rabbi Chia said in a Braita, the Yam Shlomo made could hold 150 mikvahs for water. Mikvah kama have arbim sa. So what does this imply? So we know that how big mikvah is 40 sa. Tanya brachas b'sura b'mayim b'mei mikvah. So we're actually at the pasuk of brachas b'sura b'mayim. So what does that mean? So we're actually two aspects. One of the pasuk says brachas b'sura b'mayim. So that part teaches us you have to wash your body in the water of mikvah. Kol b'sura, when it says all of your body, mayim shekol gufo olaben. When it says all of his body, that means water that the whole body fits in. And how much is that? Amma b'rum shlosh amot. As we mentioned before, it's an amma by an amma by 3 amma. And the Chachamim determines that this volume is 40 sa. So kama havalu. So wait, so how many ritual baths fit into the Yam Shel Shlomo? Chamisha ma garmidi. So we said that it was 5. We said the volume of it was 500 garmidi. L'tlat ma'a ma'a l'mem 50. So now we're doing some conversion of the math. So the volume of ritual bath is 3 cubic cubits. And so that means for the 300 of the volume, so that gives us 100 mikvahs. Then for the other of the other 150, that gives us another 50. So that would mean that 450 is enough to contain it. But why are we saying that? We say that again. We said it's made up of the volume of the Yam Shel Shlomo was 500, contained 500 cubits. So why are we So what's going on here? All right. So then why are we stating that if it actually holds 50 more, which would mean it holds another 17 or a little less than 17. So hani mili b'ribua. So rather than say this is we're talking about Yam Shel Shlomo. Yam Shel Shlomo wasn't round, it wasn't square, it was round. So you can't fit that many square mikvahs in there. If they were, volumeless, if the Yam Shel Shlomo was exactly square, you're right, but it's round, so that's not the case. So then how much more is the difference in the volume between a circle and a square? Okay, so again, so now if you're curious about the the pictorial representation of how much one is versus that of the larger square, so that's right diagram number 191. Now we're going to do the difference between a square and a circle. Again, this is a fun mathematics problem that is often covered in calculus, but you can also be proved for those interested. But we will leave that aside for now because let's do it as Gemara does it. So, how much greater is a square than a circle? Assuming they both have the same, both have the same diameter. Ruvia, it's 1/4 more. La'arba ma'a. So if there were 4 ma'a, then that means that there's an extra ma'a. Lamea, and if there was 100 ma'a, which is a volume measurement, then there'd be 25 extra. Esrim v'chamisha. Hani mea v'esrim v'chamisha habalu. So that means that according to this calculation, then the size is actually only 125 then. So wait, not 150 as stated before. So we were something wrong here. So Tani Rami Bar Yechazkel Yamshas Shlomo Shlosh Amot Atachtonot Merbaot Ushtaim Elyanot Agulot. So how do we solve this? Because if it was perfect, it was a perfect sphere. We have a problem. And so what is right? So that means that would be rounded on the bottom. That loses a lot of volume. So, or even if it's let's say if it was just like a perfect cylinder, also that's losing a lot of volume. How do we solve the issue? Basically, the shape that it made is that it started off being square on the bottom. So if it gains extra volume, then it rounds at the top, and that's how. Seen in diagram number 193, and that's how you wind up having the proper comparison of the volume. But you couldn't say the opposite. Just vato agolchi, because it says that you couldn't have said that it's square on top, round on the bottom, because it's stated in the psukim that its lip is round, so therefore the top of it has to be the round bit. So why don't you simply say that as 1 cubit on top was round, 1 cubit on the bottom was round, and the middle was square? That can't be, because it says alpayim bat yachil. It says that in the pasuk in Malachim Aleph, it says that it can hold 2,000 baht. Bat kam hava, and then how much volume is a bat? Shalosh sa'in, and a bat is 3 sa. So dichtiv maser habat minakor, as it says that a tenth of a bat. The 10th part of a bat out of the core, meaning a chomer 10 bat, means that 10 bat are a chomer. That's a pasuk in Yechazkel. So therefore, it means that a bat is a 10th of the core, or which is 3 sa. Because we know that a core is 30 sa. Tehavalei shita alpei grive, which would then mean that the Yam Shel Shlomo could hold 6,000 sa. So now if you divide, divide 6,000 by 40, you get our magic number of 150. So we're back to. So now we're good. Now we know why it works out to be what it works out to be. No problem anymore. But didn't it say? But didn't list it elsewhere that the Yam Shel Shlomo could hold 3,000? No, that's talking about. Why when it measures 3,000 baht? That's saying if you filled it with dry goods, because you do dry goods, you can pile it up as in diagram number 194. But surface tension doesn't work that way. So you can't actually heap another 50% on top of water. It'll just all spill over. That's not how that works. Or by Lamina Hagusha, so we learn from here that this when it says that Gusha Tlatahave, that that means that based on what we said before, it goes from 2,000 to 3,000. That means that when you heap dry goods, you get an extra third, or which is meaning a third from the end, or from the original 6% more. Nami Shida Teva Omigdal Kaveret Hakash Kaveret Hakanim Bor Asfina Alexandrit Avabi Sheish Lan Shulayim Vein Matzikot Arbaim Sa Balach Shein Korayim Biavesh Dorin. So, do we have diagrams here? No, we don't have diagrams here. Okay, I'll say what they are. Again, if you these are all different types of storage vessels. So they are so Shida is a carriage, Teva is a box, Migdal is a cupboard, Kaveret is a round straw, is a round straw barrel that looks like a hive. Kaveret Kadim is a round barrel made of reeds. A Bor Alexandria is a sister Alexandrian ship, which is basically it used to have ships that were made in Alexandria used to have a large container for storing water in the middle of the ship, so that you'd have water when you're traveling. So even though they have edges and they have bottoms, and mean they should be kalim, and they can hold 40, can hold 40 sa, they are considered to be virtually pure, right? So even though they can hold 40 sa, which is 2 core dry goods, so therefore they can hold it, because they shouldn't be a problem. The answer is no. We say that it works because it's all right because basically once it becomes big enough, once vessels hit a certain size, they're no longer makabel truma because they're considered to be basically b'chubal karka. Once business certain size, they're not considered to be movable vessels. They're considered to be stationary items that can't move, even though like physically they can be moved, but because functionally they can't be moved, that's sufficient. Okay, now next Mishnah. Okay. The lechis which you talked about are 10 tachim tall. And the length of their width is any amount. And this is lechis. This is lechis. Are the side posts for those? No, any amount is fine. It doesn't need anything. Right. So, but height is 10, but width is whatever. Right? Anything that you put there, as long as you can know that it's there. So Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabban, Shal Tachim. Rabbi Yossi says there has to be 3 tachim wide, less than the open bones. Chaim Shamar. So when we talk about lechis, it has to be 10 tall, but no width. So Lemas, Tanan, Stamak, Rabbi Eliezer, Damar Chaim Binan. So does it mean that the two say the Mishnah corner Rabbi Eliezer says that you need two side posts? No, they're saying side posts. I don't mean like the case that you need side posts, plural, for the entry. Rather, it's just a case where you could put that when you're using side posts, this is the measurement of side posts. If that's the case, the one they for korah, one of these is plural. My korot alma. Why did it say korah instead of saying korot? And you could simply say when say korah, referring to all korahs. Now, they mean to say as follows. When you're talking about a machloket about how many lechis you need between Rabbi and Chachamim, what are those lechis? You need 1 or 2 that are up for debate. Those lechis are gofan asar tachim, rachban avyan koshu. Those lechis that we're saying you need 1 or 2, those are 10 tall and have width of any amount. Bakam koshu, how much is any amount? So it says any amount. It could be even as thin as the string used to tie a coat. Meaning, so it's not strong. It's simply just basically to clasp the ends. It means really thin. Tana asalechi lachatzi mavoy ein lo elachatzi mavoy. If you put a lechi halfway across the mavoy, you only get half the mavoy. Sheet is not obvious. If you only malchur half the mavoy, you only get half the mavoy. You say water. So he has half. What's we say? Ein lo elachatzi versus yesh lo chatzi. Like half glass half full, glass half empty. What's the difference? Madatema. So what would you thought to say? Why does he just say it that way? Dilma ati leishtem mushe b'chule. May have thought that maybe what's the problem is that you'll end up using the second half. That's what it says. Ein lo left. So to remind you, only can use the first half. Right? So you also have thought maybe you'll end up messing up using the whole thing once you put in lechi really far in. So Kamash Balan is that it only covers as far as you place it, and that's it. Right? So that's in diagram number 196. Right? So if you put the lechi too far in, you lose all this extra area. So recommended not to do so. Amarava. Asalachi lemavoy b'gbiyam nakarka shlosha. Rabbi says, if you made a lechi for the mavoy, you lifted it from the karka 3, or shifligo min hakoto shlosha, or that you either it's 3 off the ground, the lechi, or that it's 3 off of the wall. Lo asav lo klum. You have done nothing. Afilu Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel da'amar damrinan lavud hani mili lamala, and even according to Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says that you apply lavud. These words are above, meaning when you apply lavud, being a greater gap for hand breadths, that's when you're dealing with touching the ground, trying to reach something up above it. As in, there's no picture of it. Okay, basically, so it's saying that if you're trying to reach from below up, that's when he says 4, but downwards.
Rabbi, I think it means when you're talking about a korah and you have a gap that's, let's say, 3 tfachim, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel will use lavud in that scenario, but not in this scenario where animals are going to be able to still go to and fro underneath the lechi.
What we're talking about here is the machloket between good asik and good achis, right? Whether or not you can measure as in if the gap is between, let's say, the beam and the ground versus between, let's say, the wall and the ground versus between the wall and the roof. So when it's between the wall and the ground, that's more problematic, whereas from the wall and the roof is less problematic. So we're saying that when he stated that we can view things as low, as if the whole area is filled in, that only applies up in the going upper direction, meaning where your wall is 4 from what it's supposed to be reaching, right? Meaning, let's say your wall or your lechi goes up. Let's say it went up 10 tefachim, and then the korah is 4 tefachim above that. So that's when you could fill in the gap. But if it's, but on the other hand, let's say if you had a wall or the lechi that's more than 3 above, you would not be able to lengthen the lechi all the way down.
Sorry, I'm not quite getting that. Why would you need, if you've got a lechi that goes all the way up to almost reaching the korah, why would you need it to fully reach the korah? It still could act as a lechi. It's a big lechi. I don't get that. Unless you're trying to create a tzuras of Pesach.
Yes, for sure to Pesach. That's the type of it. We're saying that when we say that we're using lavud as opposed to good achit, right? So the question, are we extending the wall up or extending the wall down, right? So then we're trying to extend the wall down towards the ground. That's when it's that right. So by use of lavud. So for that, the limit is 3. But let's say when you're trying to, let's say if you're not trying to reach let's say if you had let's say you have a series of, do we have that here? No, we don't get up to it yet. But basically when you have, here, let's look at the diagram of, like, say here we have this nice grid over here. So it means that if on the bottommost section, again, diagram number 191, if on the bottommost section, right, between these things, so if going down here, if the bottom one is less than 3, then we've got then that's fine. But if the bottom one is, between 3 and 4, that's no good. But it'll say the middle one here, according to Urban Gamliel, if the middle section, let's say you need to hit 10. You need to hit 10 for your lechi on the wall. So the bottom 3.
I just don't see that in the words of the Gemara. We're on the part right now that says,
it says right afterwards. So I feel Rabbi Shimon Gamliel da Amar Lavod Hanimin Lamala Avalamata Kima Dahavi Mechisa da Shagadim Bokin Ba Lo Kamar. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel states that we say lavud. That's only when we're talking not the area touching the ground, because when it's touching the ground, that's where the
animals go through.
Goats cross through. So in that area is a problem because animals cross through below 3.
All right,
but let's say it's between 3 and 7, that would be fine because animals aren't crossing in that region between 3 and 7. So let's say we were making you wanted to make a lechi and you only had you didn't have enough wood. So where should you leave your gap? So the answer is you could leave your gap between, let's say, so you'd want to have let's say you're putting in, let's say you're doing lavud walls, Let's say for Sukkot, you wanted to make a fence, you don't want to fill the whole thing. So you could do the bottom one could be up to 3, the middle section of Rishon could be up to 4, and then if we do another section up that, it could also be up to 4. Just the bottom one's almost limited by the 3, because of the issue of Yedim Bokim. But for Rishon Gamliel, only if it's touching the ground, because that's just where the animals travel. They don't travel higher than that. Rabbi Yossi Amar Rachban Shel Tzachim. But Rabbi Yossi says that the width of the lechi has to be 3. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Enel Rabbi Yossi, Lo Behilmi, Lo Belachayim. So then we have Rav Yosef, and then Rav Yehuda, the name of Shmuel, that Lach Rabbi Yossi, not in the case of brine on Shabbos, and not in the case of lechus here. Amar Rav Huna Bar Chanina. Hilmi Amart Lan, V'Lechina Lan, La Amart Lan. Wait, so we remember you said that we don't follow Rav Yossi about the case of brine. What about the case of signpost? You didn't tell us that. Ma'ishna Behilmi Depligir Bananale. The difference there is that by brine, by brine on Shabbos, is that's something that's a machloket that Rabbanan argue with. That's why we don't follow him. Nami Pligin Rabbanan. So here too, also the Rabbanan argue with. Amarlei Shani L'chayayin Mishum Bekai Rabbi Kvatek. So the signpost difference. Rabbi Yehuda of Nasi holds the question of Rabbi Yossi. Therefore, halacha would follow. They're both. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is supporting Rabbi Yossi. Should follow them. Rav Rechumi Matnei Hachi. Rav Rechumi says as follows: Amar Yehuda Amar Braid Rav Shmuel Bar Shela Mishmei Rav Enelach Rabbi Yossi Lo Behilmi Lo B'Chayim. Another statement saying they don't follow him either by Helmi or by Lechi. Amarlei Amart. When did you say this? Amar Lo. I didn't tell this to you guys before. So Amar Rav Elohim. So basically that's a by God, right? So Amra Ugmir Lemina. Rather, no, he really did say it, and I learned it from him, but I'd rather change his mind later. My time Makahad, right? Why did he change his mind? Mishum Rabbi Yossi Nemukomo, because Rabbi Yossi was very sharp. Therefore, the opinion could follow Rabbi Yossi even when it goes against the majority opinion, i.e. that of Amarle Rava Bar Rav Chanan Labai. Rav Chanan said to Labai, Hilta Mai, so what's the halacha today? Amarle Buchaze Mai Amadabar. He said, go out and see what people are doing. What is the practice of relying on the minimum? And therefore, and since you go out and see that everybody follows the minimal width, therefore the halacha is like that. Some say the one as follows. When was the answer? Basically, the halacha follows what people do, not necessarily based on the laws we think we have that would normally apply in terms of pasuk machloket. So maybe because it's in this case. This is in brachot. So somebody's drinking something because they're thirsty. Omer shakolim b'ro. They drink because they're thirsty. They say shakolim b'ro. Return from Omer. Borin nefashot b'rat Quran al komash brata. And return says bracha should be borin nefashot b'rat Quran al komash brata. Amar lei Rav Chanan labai hilta mai. He said, so what is the law? So he says, go out and see. And therefore, so what is the bracha we say when we're drinking water? We don't say borin nefashot b'rat Quran al komash brata. That's actually part of borin nefashot. They say after you would have drinking water. Instead, when you say before you drink, you say the bracha of shakol ne'emid vara. Okay, so today we ran through a lot of cases. We were talking about how to fill in, how to deal with again the width of and strength of a lechi and a korah. We dealt with cases where things are rounded. We dealt with cases when they are uneven. We dealt with cases where they're too close to the ground or too far or approaching that. We dealt with volume measurements of the mikvah and of the Yam Shel Shlomo. And we also dealt with the question of when we pass in halacha, what do we follow? And we saw the fact that a lot of times, even the normal rules of halacha, let's say she pass like this opinion for that opinion, a lot of times the deciding factor in halacha is based on what the communal practice is. Puk chazi my amadabar. See what people are doing, because a lot of times halacha is zikva and is determined based on the actions of the people, not based on simply the svarot. Okay, and that is it for today.
Okay, start. Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you.